If you are lying in bed now, your body resting and your eyes growing heavy, let this story carry you softly towards sleep. Tonight we begin the journey of Robert Lewandowski. You know him today as one of the greatest strikers in the history of football, a record breaker, a captain, and a legend for both club and country. But before the stadium lights, before the trophies and the chants, there was a boy in Poland, small for his age, underestimated, and yet filled with a quiet determination that would one day move mountains. This is his bedtime story, and as you listen, you may drift into dreams that, like his, begin in small places but lead to extraordinary heights. Robert Lewandowski was born on August 21st, 1988, in the small Polish town of Leszno, though he grew up in nearby Warsaw. His family was not wealthy, but it was filled with sport. His father, Krzysztof, was a judo champion and also played football at a semi-professional level. His mother, Iwona, was a volleyball player, who later worked as a physical education teacher. From the beginning, Robert's life was steeped in athletic discipline. Sport was not just an activity in the Lewandowski household, it was a way of life. His father encouraged him to play football almost as soon as he could walk. There was a small yard near their home where Robert would spend hours with a ball, dribbling, shooting, pretending he was already in a stadium. His father would join him, showing him tricks, teaching him about balance and control. His mother, meanwhile, taught him discipline and resilience. She believed in routine, in consistency, and the value of practice. For Robert, these lessons blended together. His father gave him the love of football, his mother gave him the tools to persist. But his childhood was not without difficulty. Robert was small for his age, skinny, and often underestimated. Coaches and teachers looked at him and doubted he could compete. In Poland during the 1990s, football was a tough physical game. Boys were expected to be strong, to fight, to impose themselves. Robert, thin and fragile-looking, seemed out of place. Many thought he would never make it. Some even suggested he should try another sport. Yet inside him was a stubborn fire. He loved football too much to let go. Every dismissal, every doubt only made him more determined. If others thought he was too small, he would prove them wrong. If they thought he was too weak, he would become stronger. This mindset, forged in those early years, would follow him for the rest of his career. Robert's first club was Varsovia Warsaw, a modest youth team in the Polish capital. He joined when he was just 9 years old. The facilities were basic, dusty pitches, old goals, little equipment. But for Robert, it was paradise. He would arrive early, stay late, and practice endlessly. Coaches soon noticed his passion. Though he lacked size, he had skill, speed, and above all, hunger. He wanted to touch the ball as much as possible, to play, to learn. At Varsovia, Robert played for nearly 7 years. These were formative times. The club's coaches were strict, pushing players hard, demanding effort and discipline. Robert never complained. Even when he was smaller than the others, even when defenders shoved him off the ball, he got back up and kept going. Teammates admired his resilience, though they sometimes teased him for his size. They called him the thin boy, but Robert never let it hurt him. Instead, he let it drive him. Tragedy struck during these years when Robert was still a teenager. His father, who had been his guide and supporter, passed away after illness. The loss was devastating. For a boy so close to his father, it felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath him. Yet in the midst of grief, Robert found motivation. He told himself he would honor his father by succeeding, by becoming the player his father believed he could be. It gave him a deeper purpose, one that carried him through the hardest days. By the time he reached late adolescence, Robert faced a critical challenge. Despite his skill, many top academies doubted him because of his physical frame. He was thin, still not fully grown, and some clubs rejected him outright. Legia Warsaw, one of the biggest teams in Poland, eventually released him, telling him he was too small, too weak, and unlikely to succeed at the highest level. For many, such rejection would have been the end. For Robert, it became fuel. He was determined to prove that size was not everything, that heart and discipline mattered more. At this point, Robert's mother and sister played crucial roles. They supported him unconditionally, encouraging him not to give up. His mother reminded him of the discipline she had always taught. His sister, who also played volleyball, shared the family's competitive spirit. Together, they helped Robert stay focused on his dream. During these teenage years, Robert's routine was relentless. He trained, studied, trained again. His life revolved around football. Even when resources were limited, even when equipment was poor, he made the best of it. He worked on his finishing, on his movement, on his understanding of the game. Slowly, his body began to catch up with his ambition. He grew stronger, taller, and more confident. It was around this time that Robert joined Znicz Pruszków, a smaller club outside Warsaw, after his rejection from Legia. Here, he finally found the stage to show what he could do. Though this belongs more to the next part of the story, it is important to see how his early struggles led him there. At Varsovia, he had been underestimated. At Legia, he had been rejected. At Zenit, he would prove himself. Looking back, Robert often speaks of these childhood and teenage years as the most important of his life. They were not glamorous, not easy, but they gave him resilience. They taught him to keep going when others doubted him. They showed him the value of discipline, of daily habits, of small steps forward. And they gave him the motivation to honor his father's memory with every goal he would ever score. As you lie here now, perhaps you're breathing steady. Imagine him then, a skinny boy in Warsaw, dribbling on a rough pitch, wearing boots too big for his feet. Picture him practicing shots against an old goal, the sound of the ball echoing in the quiet evening. See the determination in his eyes, even when others said no. That is the foundation of Robert Lewandowski, the boy who refused to give up, the child who turned rejection into resolve, the dreamer who would one day become a legend. After years of doubt and rejection, Robert Lewandowski stood at a crossroads. He had been released by Legia Warsaw, told that he was too small, too weak, not fit for professional football. Many young players would have accepted such judgment and turned away, finding other paths in life. But Robert was different. He carried inside him the stubborn fire of his childhood, the lessons of his father, and the discipline of his mother. He would not give up. In 2006, still a teenager, Robert joined Znicz Pruszków, a small club in Poland's third division. The facilities were modest, the crowd small, the pitches often rough. But for Robert, it was a chance, perhaps his last chance, to prove himself. He embraced it with all the energy he had. At Znicz, he trained harder than anyone, stayed after practice to work on finishing, and studied the game relentlessly. He was thin, yes, but he was fast, intelligent, and tireless. It didn't take long for results to show. In his very first season at Znicz, Robert became the league's top scorer. He repeated the feat again the following year, scoring with consistency, intelligence, and precision. Opponents underestimated him at first, but soon they realized he was no ordinary striker. His movement off the ball was sharp, his positioning instinctive, and his finishing clinical. Scouts began to take notice, but perhaps even more impressive than his goals was his mentality. Teammates remembered him as the hardest worker, the one who never cut corners, never skipped effort. He arrived early, left late, and carried himself like a professional, even in the humble surroundings of Poland's lower leagues. His coaches praised not only his talent but his discipline, calling him an example for others. The turning point came in 2008, when Lech Poznan, one of Poland's biggest clubs, decided to sign him. For Robert, it was a dream move. He had gone from rejection to a top-flight opportunity in just 2 years. The transfer fee was modest, but for him, it was priceless, a validation of all his effort, all his belief. At Lech, life changed dramatically. The facilities were far better, the crowds larger, the expectations higher. Suddenly, Robert was no longer playing in front of a few hundred fans on rough pitches, but in front of tens of thousands in modern stadiums. The pressure was immense. Could he handle the jump? Could he prove himself at the highest level in Poland? The answer, as always, came through goals. Robert adapted quickly, scoring regularly in the Ekstraklasa. His sharp instincts, clever runs, and clinical finishing made him a nightmare for defenders. He became known not just for scoring, but for scoring important goals. Decisive strikes in big matches, goals that turned games. In the 2009-10 season, Robert reached his peak in Poland. He became the league's top scorer with 18 goals, leading Lech Poznan to the Ekstraklasa title. For the first time, he lifted a major trophy. The boy who had been doubted, the teenager who had been rejected, was now the champion of Poland. The celebrations in Poznan were wild, and Robert was at the center of it all. Beyond the goals, Robert's development at Lech showed his transformation as a player. He was no longer the skinny boy struggling to be noticed. He had grown stronger, more confident, more complete. He could score with both feet, with his head from long range, from close range. He was not just a poacher. He was a modern striker, versatile and intelligent. The Polish media began to take notice in a big way. Headlines praised his rise from obscurity to stardom. Journalists called him the Polish gem, the new hope, the striker of the future. Fans adored him, chanting his name, celebrating his goals. For Poland, a nation hungry for football success, Robert represented hope. But as his star rose, so did the attention from abroad. Scouts from bigger leagues came to watch him. Clubs from Germany, Italy, and Spain showed interest. Among them was Borussia Dortmund, guided by the charismatic coach Jürgen Klopp. They saw in Robert not just goals, but potential for greatness. Before Dortmund, though, Robert's story in Poland deserves one more reflection. In just a few years, he had gone from being released by Lewa, doubted by many, to becoming the top scorer and champion with Lech. His journey was a lesson in perseverance, in the power of belief, in the value of hard work. For young Polish players, his story became an inspiration. Proof that rejection does not mean the end, and that even the smallest beginnings can lead to the brightest successes. As you rest tonight, imagine him in Poznan during those days, the stadium alive with chants, the blue and white colors waving, the air electric with celebration. Picture him lifting the trophy, smiling, knowing how far he had come, yet also dreaming of how far he could still go. He was no longer just a boy with potential. He was a striker ready for Europe, ready for the next chapter of his journey. After conquering Poland with Lech Poznan, Robert Lewandowski's destiny pulled him toward a larger stage. The summer of 2010 brought a life-changing move. Borussia Dortmund, a club rich in history, passion, and one of the most electrifying fan bases in the world. For Robert, this was the leap from promise to possibility, from being Poland's brightest young striker to a challenger in the heart of Europe. The transfer was not without drama. At the time, Robert had drawn interest from clubs in Spain and England. Blackburn Rovers were seriously considering him, and there were even discussions of a possible move to Serie A. But fate intervened. A volcanic eruption in Iceland grounded flights across Europe in the spring of 2010, preventing him from traveling to England for talks. Instead, the call from Germany grew louder, and Borussia Dortmund, under the guidance of Jürgen Klopp, sealed the deal for around $4.5 million. What seemed a small twist of fate became one of the most important transfers of the decade. When Robert arrived in Dortmund, he stepped into a football culture unlike anything he had ever experienced. The famous yellow wall of Signal Iduna Park, the Sud Tribune, was a towering sea of black and yellow, 25,000 fans standing, singing, roaring every home game. It was football as religion, intense and consuming. For a boy from Warsaw, it must have felt overwhelming but also thrilling. Jürgen Klopp, Dortmund's charismatic coach, quickly became the most important figure in Robert's career. Klopp was more than a tactician. He was a motivator, a mentor, a father figure to many of his players. He saw in Lewandowski not just a striker, but a raw diamond waiting to be shaped. Klopp's football was demanding, pressing relentlessly, running endlessly, attacking with speed and courage. It was not easy, but for Robert, it was the perfect environment to grow. His first season, however, was not immediately glorious. Robert often came off the bench, learning the rhythms of the Bundesliga. He scored modestly, working hard but sometimes struggling to impose himself. Critics wondered if he could make the step up from Poland. But Klopp was patient. He believed in process, in growth. Robert will become extraordinary, he told journalists who questioned him. And behind closed doors, he worked with him tirelessly. Training under Klopp was intense. Sessions were filled with drills designed not only to sharpen skills, but to instill mentality. Klopp demanded pressing from the front, intelligent movement, unselfish play. For Robert, it was a new education. He learned when to press, how to time runs, how to link with midfielders. His body grew stronger under German fitness programs, his mind sharper under Klopp's guidance. Slowly, steadily, he began to transform. By his second season, the transformation was visible to all. Robert became the starting striker, scoring 22 goals in all competitions. Dortmund won the Bundesliga in 2010-11, their first league title in nearly a decade. The celebrations were wild, the yellow wall exploding with joy. And Robert, once doubted in Poland, was now a champion in Germany. The following year, 2011-12, he reached even greater heights. Robert scored 22 league goals, finishing as one of the top scorers in the Bundesliga. Dortmund defended their title, playing thrilling, high-energy football that captured the hearts of fans across Europe. In the German Cup final, Lewandowski delivered one of his most iconic performances, scoring a hat-trick against Bayern Munich in a 5-2 victory. It was Dortmund's first domestic double, and Robert was the hero. The boy who had been rejected for being too small was now dismantling one of the world's biggest clubs on the grandest stage in Germany. But the moment that defined his Dortmund career came in April 2013, the UEFA Champions League semi-final against Real Madrid. Dortmund, underdogs against the Spanish giants, needed something extraordinary. That night, Robert delivered perhaps the greatest individual performance of his career. He scored 4 goals, yes, 4, against Real Madrid, becoming the first player ever to do so in a Champions League semi-final. Each goal was different: a poacher's finish, a thunderous strike, a calm penalty, a composed close-range shot. The yellow wall trembled with ecstasy. Commentators shouted in disbelief, and Robert Lewandowski's name echoed across the world. That performance was not just about goals, it was about statement. He had arrived among the elite, no longer just Poland's star, no longer just Dortmund's striker. He was one of the best in the world. Newspapers called him unstoppable. Real Madrid players admitted they had no answers, and Klopp embraced him afterward with pride. Dortmund reached the Champions League final that year at Wembley, facing their great rivals Bayern Munich. For Robert, it was the pinnacle of his Dortmund journey. Though Dortmund lost narrowly, his impact throughout the campaign was undeniable. He had carried his team on the biggest stage, and Europe knew his name. But even as he shone, challenges remained. Bayern, with their vast resources, began circling. Rumors swirled that they wanted to sign him. For Dortmund fans, the thought was painful. Losing their hero to their fiercest rivals, Robert, professional and focused, continued to give everything on the pitch. He scored 28 goals in 2012-13, followed by 28 more in 2013-14. He was consistent, reliable, relentless. Through it all, Klopp remained central. The relationship between the two was built on trust and respect. Klopp pushed Robert to new levels, and Robert repaid him with performances that transformed Dortmund into one of Europe's most feared teams. Years later, Robert would often credit Klopp as the coach who shaped him, who believed in him when others doubted, who gave him the tools to become world-class. Off the field, Robert's life in Dortmund was quiet. He avoided distractions, focused on training, recovery, and improvement. His wife, Anna Lewandowska, a nutritionist and athlete herself, played a crucial role in his discipline. Together, they created routines that optimized his body and mind. Diet, rest, training, it was all carefully planned. The skinny boy, once rejected for his frame, was now building himself into one of the fittest athletes in football. By the time he left Dortmund in 2014, Robert had scored 103 goals in 187 appearances. He had won 2 Bundesliga titles, a German Cup, and reached a Champions League final. More than trophies, he had proven himself at the highest level, transforming from a raw striker into a complete forward. He pressed, he passed, he created, he finished. He was not just a scorer, he was a leader, a symbol of Klopp's Dortmund. As you lie here now, imagine him at Signal Iduna Park in those years. Picture the roar of 80,000 fans, the sea of yellow. The chants of Louis, Louis, filling the air. Picture him sprinting onto a pass, striking the ball cleanly, the net rippling, his arms raised as the crowd erupts. Picture Klopp on the sidelines, fist pumping, shouting with joy, proud of his striker. This was the Dortmund era of Robert Lewandowski, a time of growth, of triumph, of unforgettable nights under the lights. A time when the boy from Warsaw became a man, when the doubted child became a world-class striker, when the story of greatness truly began to shine. When Robert Lewandowski left Borussia Dortmund in the summer of 2014, he was not just changing clubs, he was stepping into the heart of Germany's biggest footballing empire. Bayern Munich, the giants of the Bundesliga, the kings of consistency, the club of Beckenbauer, Müller, and countless legends, had courted him for years. For Dortmund fans, his departure was painful, a betrayal to some. But for Robert, it was the next logical step. If he wanted to reach the absolute peak of football, Bayern was the mountain he had to climb. The move was controversial because it was free. Robert's contract with Dortmund had expired, and Bayern swooped in to sign him without paying a transfer fee. The German press erupted, rivals fumed, and Dortmund supporters felt the sting of losing yet another star to their rivals. But Bayern celebrated. They had gained one of the world's best strikers at no cost, a move that would go down as one of the smartest in modern football history. Life in Munich was different. Bayern was a machine, a club with world-class facilities, a winning culture, and expectations higher than anywhere else. At Dortmund, Robert had been part of Klopp's underdog revolution. At Bayern, he joined a dynasty. The pressure was relentless. Winning the Bundesliga was not success, it was the minimum. Every season was measured in Champions League triumphs, in records, in dominance. Robert adapted quickly. In his first season, 2014-15, he scored 25 goals in all competitions. He linked well with teammates like Arjen Robben, Frank Ribéry, and Thomas Müller, learning the rhythms of Bayern's play. But it was under Pep Guardiola, Bayern's coach at the time, that Robert truly began to refine his game. Guardiola demanded precision, intelligence, versatility. He wanted Lewandowski not just to score, but to connect play, to press, to be involved in every phase. Some strikers might have resisted. Robert embraced it. He became not only a goal scorer, but a complete forward, capable of dropping deep, linking passes, and creating space for others. Then came the night that would define him forever. September 22, 2015. Bayern Munich versus Wolfsburg in the Bundesliga. Bayern were trailing 1-0 at halftime. Guardiola looked frustrated, his team sluggish. Lewandowski came on as a substitute at the break. What happened next is one of the most extraordinary feats in football history. In just 9 minutes, Robert Lewandowski scored 5 goals. 5. Each one different, each one devastating. Poacher's finish, a volley, a thunderous strike, a tap-in, another from distance. The stadium erupted. Commentators lost their voices. Guardiola stood on the sidelines laughing in disbelief, his hands on his head. Never before had the Bundesliga seen anything like it. In less than 10 minutes, Robert had rewritten history, delivering a performance so surreal, it seemed almost impossible. The world took notice. Headlines declared him superhuman, a phenomenon, a striker from another planet. His name trended worldwide, his goals replayed endlessly. Even years later, fans still speak of the 5 goals in 9 minutes as one of football's greatest moments. For Robert, it was proof, not only to others but to himself, that he was capable of things beyond imagination. But Lewandowski was not just about one magical night. Season after season, he delivered goals with ruthless consistency. He became the Bundesliga's top scorer multiple times, breaking records once thought unbreakable. He scored with both feet, with his head, from free kicks, from penalties, from open play. He was the complete package. In 2019-20, his dominance reached its peak. That season, Robert scored 55 goals in 47 matches, leading Bayern to a historic treble: Bundesliga, DFB Pokal, and the UEFA Champions League. In the Champions League final against Paris Saint-Germain, he did not score. But his presence, his movement, his relentless work terrified defenders and created space for teammates. Bayern lifted the trophy, and Lewandowski, after years of chasing European glory, stood at the very top of world football. The football world recognized his greatness. Many believed he should have won the Ballon d'Or in 2020, but the award was canceled, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a cruel twist of fate. At the very moment he was the best player in the world, the prize was taken away. But Robert remained calm, professional, and humble. He focused not on awards, but on performances. "I don't play for trophies like that," he said softly in interviews. "I play for my team, for goals, for winning." Yet fans and pundits alike still insist Robert Lewandowski in 2020 was the true best player in the world. His Bundesliga records became legendary. He broke Gerd Müller's seemingly eternal record of 40 goals in a single Bundesliga season, scoring 41 in 2020-21. When he surpassed Müller, a German icon, many wondered if anyone could ever match such a feat. Lewandowski did not only match it, he exceeded it. That moment secured his place as perhaps the greatest striker in Bundesliga history. Teammates at Bayern praised him endlessly. Thomas Müller called him the perfect striker. Manuel Neuer spoke of his professionalism, his relentless training. Young players admired his routines, his discipline, his humility despite his success. Lewandowski was not just a scorer. He was a leader, a role model. Off the field, his life in Munich was stable and grounded. With his wife Anna, a nutritionist and fitness expert, he built a lifestyle around health and discipline. Their partnership was famous in Poland and Germany alike. Together they became a symbol of balance, of sport, of dedication. Fans admired not only Robert's goals but his family values, his quiet strength. For Polish fans, Robert's success at Bayern was a source of immense pride. He carried the hopes of his country, scoring for the national team, wearing the captain's armband with dignity. Even as he conquered Germany, he remained Poland's hero, their greatest ever footballer, their inspiration. And through all the records, all the trophies, Robert never lost the humility forged in his youth. He often spoke of his father, of how he wished he could see him now, of how every goal carried a piece of that memory. He spoke of his rejections as a boy, of being told he was too small, and how those moments shaped him. He never forgot where he came from, and that humility made his greatness even greater. As you lie here now, imagine him at the Allianz Arena in Munich. The stadium glowing red, the crowd roaring, his name echoing across the night. Picture him sprinting onto a pass, striking the ball cleanly. The net rippling, his arms raised, teammates rushing to embrace him. Picture the 5 goals in 9 minutes, the treble in 2020, the 41st goal to break Müller's record. Picture a man at the absolute peak of his powers. Calm, disciplined, relentless, adored. This was the Bayern era of Robert Lewandowski, a time when he was not only the best striker in Germany, but perhaps the best in the world. A time when the doubted boy from Warsaw became the king of Munich, the record breaker, the unstoppable force. A time when his story became legend. By 2022, Robert Lewandowski had achieved nearly everything a striker could dream of at Bayern Munich. He had lifted multiple Bundesliga trophies, conquered the Champions League, shattered Gerd Müller's sacred record, and been recognized globally as one of the most lethal forwards in history. Yet deep inside, a new voice was calling, a voice that spoke of change, of challenge, of a new chapter. Robert, now in his mid-30s, wanted something different. He wanted to test himself once more, in another league, in another culture, under another sky. The summer of 2022 would become one of the most dramatic moments of his career. Robert made it clear he wanted to leave Bayern Munich. For a man so closely tied to the club's success, the announcement was shocking. Fans were confused, some even angry. Why would he leave when he was still at the peak of his powers? Why Barcelona, a club struggling financially, a team no longer the dominant force of old? The reasons were layered. Robert felt he needed a new motivation, a new challenge. After 8 years in Germany, he knew every defender, every stadium, every rhythm of the league. He longed to test himself in Spain, to experience La Liga, to embrace the history of Barcelona. There was also a dream. He had always admired the Spanish style of play, the technical brilliance, the flair. And deep down, he wanted to prove that age was only a number, that he could dominate not just in Germany, but in another of Europe's great leagues. The negotiations between Bayern and Barcelona were tense, sometimes bitter. Bayern's board resisted, unwilling to let their superstar go. Public statements from Munich insisted he would stay, that his contract would be respected. But Robert stood firm. "My story at Bayern is over," he declared in interviews, a rare moment of sharpness from the usually calm striker. For him, it was not about disrespect, it was about evolution. He had given everything to Bayern, and now he needed something new. Finally, in July 2022, the deal was struck. Barcelona paid around $50 million for a striker already past 30, a fee some critics called too high. But the Catalans believed in him, and Robert believed in himself. As he stood at the Camp Nou, presented before thousands of fans waving Blaugrana flags, he smiled. A new adventure had begun. The context of his arrival made the challenge even greater. Barcelona was in crisis. Lionel Messi had left the year before. Financial troubles plagued the club, and their reputation had been shaken. Many wondered if Lewandowski was arriving at the wrong time, if the club was too broken for him to succeed. But Robert saw opportunity. He was not intimidated by the shadows of Messi or the doubts of critics. He came to lead, to inspire, to score. From his very first matches in La Liga, he proved the doubters wrong. Goals flowed quickly, tap-ins, volleys, headers, calm finishes. Spanish defenders, accustomed to clever strikers, were suddenly confronted with his combination of power and intelligence. He was not only scoring, he was transforming Barcelona's attack. His presence gave young players confidence. His movement created space. His finishing turned half-chances into victories. In his debut season, he scored 23 goals in La Liga, finishing as the league's top scorer and winning the Pichichi Trophy, the award for Spain's leading marksman. Few had imagined it possible. A player new to the league at 34, outscoring young Spanish talents and seasoned veterans alike. It was another reminder of his timeless quality. Age did not weaken him. Discipline kept him sharp, but his impact went beyond goals. Robert became a mentor to Barcelona's new generation. Players like Pedri, Gavi, and Ansu Fati. He guided them not only on the pitch, showing them movement, positioning, and mentality, but also off it, sharing his routines, his discipline, his professionalism. For these young stars, playing alongside him was like attending a masterclass every day. They absorbed his habits, his hunger, his humility. The Spanish media, initially skeptical, quickly embraced him. Headlines praised his leadership, his class, his professionalism. Fans chanted his name at the Camp Nou, grateful for the goals, but also for the hope he brought. In a time of turbulence, Lewandowski gave Barcelona stability. He became their talisman, their symbol of resilience. Of course, there were challenges. Barcelona was rebuilding, struggling in Europe, facing criticism for financial management. In the Champions League, results were disappointing. Critics questioned whether Lewandowski alone could lift the club back to its former glory. But he never flinched. His focus remained steady: score, improve, lead. He never promised miracles. He promised effort. And with every match, he gave exactly that. Life in Spain suited him in many ways. He enjoyed the culture, the food, the sunshine. His family settled in well, his wife Anna often posting glimpses of their life in Barcelona. Robert himself kept his routine strict: early nights, careful diet, relentless training. But he also embraced the joy of the city, its rhythm, its beauty. For a man who had spent much of his career in the colder climates of Germany and Poland, the warmth of Spain was refreshing. In interviews, Robert spoke often of motivation. He said he wanted to show young players that age did not define limits. He wanted to be a role model not only in goals but in longevity. He spoke of how he admired athletes in other sports who extended their careers through discipline, and he wanted to do the same. He was not content with being remembered for the past. He wanted to shape the present and future. The fans, too, appreciated his humility. He never compared himself to Messi, never pretended to replace him. He respected the history of Barcelona, the greatness that came before him. But he carved his own place. He was Lewandowski, not Messi, not Ronaldinho, not Eto'o. And that authenticity endeared him even more. By his second season, Robert's influence was clear. He had become not just a striker, but a leader of men. In the dressing room, his voice mattered. On the pitch, his example set the tone. Off the field, his professionalism inspired. Barcelona may not yet have returned to the heights of their golden era. But with Lewandowski, they found a compass, a direction, a belief. As you lie here now, imagine him at the Camp Nou, the vast stadium filled with red and blue, the evening sky over Catalonia painted gold by the setting sun. Picture him standing tall, ready for kickoff, his eyes calm, his body prepared. Picture the moment when the ball comes to him in the box, the crowd holding its breath, and then strike. The net ripples, the fans erupt, and Robert lifts his arms, smiling, once again proving himself on a new stage. His Barcelona chapter is not yet finished. It is still being written, match by match, goal by goal. But already it has shown his greatness is not bound by leagues or countries. From Poland to Germany to Spain, Robert Lewandowski has carried the same truth. Talent is nothing without discipline, and age is nothing when matched with hunger. We have already walked through Robert's long path. The boy from Warsaw who was rejected for being too small. The young man who proved himself at Zenit and Lech. The striker who grew into a world-class forward under Jurgen Klopp in Dortmund. The record breaker at Bayern Munich, and the leader who took on a new challenge with Barcelona. Yet there is still more to tell, because Robert's story is not only written in the number of goals or the trophies he has lifted, but in the habits, the choices, and the personality that have made him who he is. It is in the legacy he leaves for others, and in the question of what awaits him when the time comes to step away from the pitch. Robert Lewandowski is, at his core, a man defined by discipline. Teammates, coaches, and journalists often speak of his remarkable consistency, but consistency is not born from luck. It comes from the small daily choices that he has repeated for decades. From the moment he wakes up, his day is structured carefully, designed around performance and health. Nutrition is central. With the guidance of his wife Anna, who is a certified nutritionist and a former karate champion, every meal is thought through. They plan what to eat, when to eat, even the order of eating. It might sound obsessive to some, but for Robert it is simply normal. He will sometimes start with dessert, not because he is indulgent, but because Anna discovered it helps balance blood sugar and energy. His diet avoids processed foods and sugars, focuses on lean proteins, healthy fats, and vegetables. Eating like training is part of the work. Training itself is meticulous. Even outside the season, Robert does not allow himself to fall out of shape. Coaches at Bayern and Barcelona have said he trains like he is always preparing for the next final. During off-seasons, he works with personal trainers, experimenting with new exercises, always searching for small improvements. He pays attention to every detail: strength, speed, coordination, recovery. He treats his body like a laboratory, testing, learning, adjusting. And above all, he treats it with respect. Rest is equally important. Robert is almost evangelical about sleep. He goes to bed early, avoids phones and screens before resting, and uses breathing exercises to calm his mind. He has said many times that sleep is as crucial as training. In a world where many footballers fall into lifestyles of excess, of late nights and distractions, Robert has built a routine that may sound boring to outsiders, but has kept him at the top of world football into his mid-30s. His discipline is not restrictive to him, it is freedom. It allows him to step on the pitch knowing he has done everything to be ready. Behind this discipline is the presence of family. His father, Christoph, who passed away when Robert was still a teenager, remains one of the deepest influences on his life. Robert often mentions him in interviews, wishing he could see the man he has become. His father had been the one to encourage him to play football, to believe in himself, to keep fighting even when small. Every success Robert has ever had carries a trace of dedication to that memory. His mother Iwona was another central figure. She was a volleyball player and a teacher, and she taught him routine, resilience, and humility. His sister Milena, also an athlete, contributed to this culture of competition and support. And then, of course, there is Anna, his wife. More than a partner, she is a collaborator. Together, they have built not just a family, but a system. She manages his diet, helps plan his training, and gives him the emotional support to perform. Their partnership has often been cited as one of the strongest in football, a symbol of balance between personal and professional life. This stability off the pitch has made Robert a calm figure on it. He is rarely rattled, rarely drawn into controversy, rarely distracted. Even in the biggest games, even under the brightest lights, he carries himself with composure. This mental strength is as much a part of his success as his finishing. For Poland, Robert is more than a striker. He is a national symbol. Wearing the red and white shirt, he has carried the hopes of millions. He became captain, leader, and inspiration. In a country where football has often disappointed on the biggest stage, Lewandowski represents belief. His goals in qualifiers, his leadership in tournaments, his very presence has been enough to give Poland confidence. Critics have sometimes questioned whether he could replicate his club form for the national team, but those who understand the game know the weight he carries. Often surrounded by less experienced teammates, often targeted by defenders who know stopping him means stopping Poland, he still delivers. And even when Poland's campaigns fall short, his leadership remains unquestioned. The Polish people adore him not only for his goals but for what he represents: resilience, perseverance, excellence. He has become a national hero, appearing on billboards and advertisements in the dreams of children kicking balls in playgrounds. Young boys and girls in Warsaw, Krakow, Gdansk, and tiny villages alike wear his shirt, dreaming of becoming the next Lewandowski. His success has elevated Polish football, inspiring investment, interest, and hope for future generations. In the broader world of football, Robert has also reshaped the image of the striker. In an era where many coaches shifted to false nines and fluid systems, some claimed the traditional striker was disappearing. Lewandowski proved otherwise. He showed that the number 9 role was not outdated. It was evolving. He was not just a poacher waiting in the box. He could press, link play, create, and still finish with clinical precision. He became a complete forward, the model for modern strikers. Coaches now point to him as the example for how to play the role in today's game. His legacy is not only in the goals he scored, but in the way he changed the conversation about what a striker could be. His rivals and peers respect him deeply. Defenders who faced him describe him as one of the toughest opponents, not only because of his skill, but because he never stops moving, never stops pressing, never loses focus. Teammates speak of his professionalism, his dedication, his humility. Young players at Barcelona and Bayern talk about how he guided them, not with arrogance but with quiet advice, and leading by example. When players like Pedri, Gavi, or Musiala talk about Lewandowski, they describe him as both a star and a mentor. Robert's influence is also seen in the awards and records he has gathered. He has been Bundesliga top scorer multiple times, has lifted domestic titles year after year, and has been named FIFA Best Men's Player. He broke Gerd Müller's sacred record of 40 goals in a Bundesliga season by scoring 41 in 2020-21, a feat many thought impossible. He became the fastest to reach certain Champions League goal milestones, joining the names of Messi, Ronaldo, and Raúl. For many, the only thing missing from his career is a Ballon d'Or, an award most agree he should have won in 2020, before the pandemic forced its cancellation. That year, he was at the very peak of football, the best player in the world, and though the trophy was denied him, the recognition remains in the minds of fans and experts alike. Yet perhaps what makes Robert's legacy strongest is not the numbers, but his character. He is humble, rarely boastful. In interviews, he speaks plainly, calmly, sometimes even shyly. He rarely makes bold claims or dramatic statements. Instead, he lets his actions define him. When asked about his goals, he often replies, "I just focus on the next game." It is not false modesty. It is his true mentality. Never satisfied, never distracted, always moving forward. As you imagine him now, picture him at the Camp Nou after scoring, surrounded by young teammates looking up to him. Picture him as captain of Poland, standing tall as the anthem plays, his eyes steady, his expression calm. Picture him at Bayern, lifting the Champions League trophy with a quiet smile, not shouting, not boasting, just fulfilled. This is Robert Lewandowski. Not just a scorer of goals, but a man of discipline, humility, and leadership. And what of the future? Robert is in the later years of his career, but his body shows little sign of slowing. With his routines, his discipline, and his health, Many believe he can play at the top for several more seasons. At Barcelona, he continues to be central, leading a new generation. For Poland, he remains the captain, guiding them toward tournaments, carrying their hopes. Beyond playing, his path seems clear. He will likely remain in football, perhaps as a mentor, a coach, or a voice for young players. He speaks often of wanting to help the next generation, to share what he has learned. He may also continue his influence outside the game. With Anna, he is already invested in businesses, fitness projects, and charitable causes. He has the potential to become not only a football legend but a cultural figure, someone who inspires beyond the pitch. For Poland, he will always be a hero. For Europe, he will always be one of the greatest strikers to ever play. As your eyes close now, let this thought stay with you. Robert Lewandowski's story is not only about goals or trophies or records. It is about resilience in the face of doubt, discipline in the face of temptation, humility in the face of fame. It is about a boy who was told he was too small, who chose to believe otherwise, and who built himself into a giant. It is about a man who never stopped working, never stopped dreaming, never stopped striving. And though his career will one day end, his legacy will not. It will live in the players he inspired, in the fans who adored him, and in the story we tell.